PAG.
Jamie Brown with PAG.
James Tao, PAG RTA.
Jeanette Duran, PAG.
Sonia Kelly with PAG.
Hannah Oden, PAG.
Lance Peterson with PAG.
David Mitchell with PAG.
Get everybody. Ladies back here.
Not Garcia with PAG.
Welcome, everybody. Okay, we moved on to second item on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about this. And then on, we got online, we have, let's see, we got, Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Dan Gabbio, Federal Highways.
Lolly?
Good morning, everybody. This is Nalo Thomas Arita.
Oh, sorry about that. And Jason?
Good morning, everyone. Jason Bahi, Pasquiyaki Tribe.
And Tom?
Yes, this is Thomas Garcia with the town of Sarita.
Get everybody online. Do we have anybody else? Any missed?
Hey, good morning. This is Adam Ledford from PAG.
And this is David Zinda from PAG.
And Mark Novak from the University of Arizona.
Anybody else? Hearing none. Welcome, everybody. Moving on to item number 2, in-kind reporting. Matt?
Great. Good morning, everyone. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAC collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of the meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have signing sheet going around? Please sign. Sign in. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the November 15th, 2023 meeting summary. Everybody get a chance to take a look at it? Get a motion? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, FY 2025-2029 TIP development process update and review of any available draft TIP projects. Okay. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Good morning, everybody. I've got some slides I'd like to share with you and talk through the TIP development process today. So as all of you are familiar, we've talked about in the past some of the key considerations for this TIP development cycle. So I'm not going to go through those again because I think we've talked about those multiple times. Happy to answer questions, but as you know, in March, the Regional Council did grant an extension for the TIP development process. So we're now talking about fiscal years 25 through 2029 in terms of the framing time frame. And because of these unique circumstances, we have added some principles for TIP development in the packet materials that we provided to you as part of a cover sheet for the latest version of the roadway element worksheet. So I'm going to talk through some of those principles, give you other updates, and then I was happy to take questions. So in terms of project cost estimates, estimates for project costs are intended solely for programming purposes. The cutoff date for those cost estimates was the October 31st meeting. As you may recall, we several weeks before that meeting, we did request information from project sponsors that had roadway projects on the worksheet. We had 9 questions, including cost estimates. So that's when that information was presented. We have to recognize that this is a static snapshot in time, and we can't continuously update that because if we do, we won't really get to May with the final draft yet. So that's something we'll kind of keep coming back to. In terms of revenue estimates, similar to cost estimates, revenue estimates are also a one-time snapshot and must remain constant for financial constraint analysis analysis moving forward. In the packet materials, we talk about the sources of the revenue estimates for curve 12.6, 2.6, and SPG. Happy to talk about those if these questions, but that's not included in the slide. FY 2024 exclusion. FY 2024 will not be included in the new TIP. The proposed TIP amendment for the exchange of funds must be addressed separately through the official TIP amendment process. And happy to take questions. If anybody has questions about what that formal TIP amendment process is, please do reach out to PAG staff, Carolyn or me, with your questions. We do request formal letters requesting a TIP amendment that are addressed to the executive director and have all the details in terms of the amounts, fund sources. Next slide, please. Thank you. FY 2025 programming, as long as fiscal year 2025 is reasonably programmed for anticipated construction projects, FY 2025 through 2029 TIP fulfills its intended purpose. FY 2025 RTA budget. The FY 2025 RTA budget ensures that projects ready for construction will have supplemental funding for eligible RTA expenses. It is prudent that this flexibility is retained for project delivery. IGAs and or TIP amendments may be used to make adjustments after the TIP document is adopted. So again, going back to this project list needs to be a snapshot in time, understanding we probably make adjustments after May to incorporate potentially RTA augmentation or TIP amendments to adjust some funding. You know, the FY25 RTA budget has not yet been developed, but our process is usually to have that prepared for RTA board consideration in May. Priority for project starts. Projects requiring initiation prior to July 1st, 2026 will be prioritized to ensure compliance with RTA regulations. These projects are shown in the RTA roadway element worksheet with cells highlighted in green under the project name. We're going to have a TIP subcommittee meeting after this meeting, this TPC. We're going to walk through the worksheet and you're going to see. So, you know, we could talk about it in the context of a TPC, but also know that TIP subcommittee is going to talk about the worksheet as well. Update for fiscal years 26 through 29. Due to the expiration and or potential renewal of RTA revenues, fiscal years 26 through 29 of the TIP will need to be updated at another time. So, as you know, RTA Next is under development, but we don't really know what the outcome will be in terms of regional support, voter approval, and things like that, and timing of that for sure. So we will have to be flexible once some of those milestones are reached. Deferred scope change projects. Projects with deferred scope changes rely on RTA Next funding and voter approval. While Pima County's First Avenue Orange Grove Road to Ina Road project may use federal funds, it is still considered a scope change deferred project that requires voter approval before proceeding with the change scope. Hence, the start time prior to July 1st, 2026 is not required. RTA Next contingency. If RTA Next does not pass, the RTA Board's FY26 budget will be utilized to amend the TIP as needed. And my understanding is that if RTA Next does not pass, that the RTA Board will continue to, working with RTA staff, develop an annual budget until those funds are exhausted.
I believe that's correct.
We can come back to any of these. Just a couple more slides. Anticipated schedule for the TIP development process. So September through October, that's the TIP subcommittee's review of updated RTA roadway element cost estimates. So we've had several meetings where that's been discussed. September through December, TIP subcommittee review and discussion of RTA roadway element programming or SDEG and HERF 12.6. Actually, today we're going to be talking about HERF 2.6 as well. November through December, Transit Working Group review of the transit project list. December and January, preliminary committee review of draft TIP project list. So we did include in the packet 2 draft project lists for PPC review, consideration, discussion. And we're going to continue to bring those forward next month as well. So we're going to have more project lists to share with TPC in January. We'd like to bring the full draft project list to TPC in February if we're able to stay on schedule. In March, Management Committee and Regional Council review of the full draft TIP project list is anticipated. As typical, we'd like to hold our open houses in mid to late March. And we're going to, as we get closer, we'll establish some dates and we'll reach out to TPC members and request your help and your participation at those. April, TPC reviewed recommendation for approval of the full draft tip document, as well as commencing the 30-day public comment period on the draft tip. And then in May, management committee will review the final draft tip. And at the end of May, we anticipate convening a public hearing at the regional council meeting. Public comment period comes to a close and request approval of the full draft tip. So we talk about different project lists. I wanted to share screen and show, sort of what we're talking about. Handful of separate lists that all come together into one full draft list. So in your packet, we have a draft RTM projects list, and you can see a screen grab of that. Sometimes colorful worksheet that we've been using. The ADOT projects, thank you to Rod and Mark for providing a draft of their projects, and that's included in the packet as well. The transit project list, the transit working group actually took action last week. We didn't have time to incorporate it into this packet, so we anticipate bringing the transit project list to next month. Thank you for locally funded and grant funded roadway projects. We distributed a memo to member agencies asking for your responses to any locally funded or grant funded projects that should be incorporated into the tip. And, the deadline has passed, but we may be able to accommodate more if there are more. But we may have to also just wait until after this tip is approved to incorporate any additional project, unless it's absolutely necessary. So we also have been working with Carolyn's been working with the Airport Authority on aviation projects and updating that list. We've got the PAG overall work program activities, including TABI and transportation planning. Anticipate that those amounts will be consistent with what was reviewed last spring. Miscellaneous non-roadway projects such as HSIP safety projects, 5310 projects. We have a reserve project list as well, and we asked for your input on that memo that we shared several weeks ago. And then the completed projects. Which projects are shown in the tip that are anticipated to be completed by June 30th, 2024? That's critical for the base year modeling that our modeling team understands to develop. So thank you for your input on that as well. And I think that might be my last slide. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none. This is a informational item only. So we move on to item number 5, regional transportation revenue update. James.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of TPC. I'll go ahead and begin with Table 3 and Figure 1. Through October, there was 59.5 million in HERF and BLT collected across the region. Of that 59.5 million, TAG collected about 12.4 million, or about 21% of that regional funding. The remainder was distributed directly to our jurisdictional partners. Regional HERF revenues were almost 5%. We're almost a 5% increase year over year. Over the 5-year average, we stand at about 9%. In Table 4, it shows 12.6 in detail. So far, we've collected $10,147,489, which is 15.3% more than implied by the ADOT official forecast, and about 9.5% stronger than last year. Table 5 shows HERF 2.6. with stronger than expected collections totaling $2.2 million year to date, which is 13% stronger than last year. And Table 6, currently PAG has just over 79.6 million in an interest-bearing account. Most of these dollars are spoken for. Table 7, we look at the city and town HERF distributions year to date. Table 8 shows the HERF 12.6 and 2.6 we've already seen. Additionally, we have Pima County HERF and Pima County vehicle license tax, the portion set aside for transportation use only. And Table 9 has the previous 5 years and lets you see how much HERF your city or town received. Table 10 shows us gallons of gas sold in Pima County through various fiscal years. We normally like to see about 13%, and we are just under 13% for the current fiscal year. And in table 11, we see about $50.6 million collected in TPT this year, trending for more than 5% gain over the adopted budget. That also mimics the percent rise over last year's actuals, also over 5%. So that was brief, concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to, this is a summary, informational item. So we will move on to item number 6, ADOT safety performance projection for 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm David Mitchell. I bring in front of you today the annual statewide safety performance projections. These are what we call fast action projections. To remind you or to inform you of this program, if you're not familiar, this is an annual exercise. The state is required by federal legislature to set performance targets, projections, safety projections for the upcoming year. They use existing data points to establish the trends, to by forecast for the years ahead, to establish a 2-year target based on the data that they're working in. Something that PAG has participated in since 2018. Annually, we have adopted state targets, state projections. We relied on the safety projections that we have in our map as the ones that we strive for through our planning, programming, and policy practices. So that's unintended alliteration. These are the figures in chart format. The projections themselves are the 5-year average. So the column on the right are the official projections. They have used existing trend data and conservative forecasting technique. Projected 2024 total, that's what you see in the first column. There's 5 different measures. You can see where they project the statewide numbers to be in the next 5-year period. We'll look at each measure individually on these upcoming charts. The bars in red are the year-over-year totals. You can see we're looking at close to a 20-year history, actually exactly 20-year history of data. The green line is your rolling 5-year average, and the yellow bars are the forecasted values using the existing data points. At the time of development, they hadn't officially gotten all of the 2022 data points processed, so this time around, they're forecasting 2 years of data for the 2024 projections. Table or the chart we're looking at here are the fatalities. These are total statewide fatalities. ADOT projects that they are continuing to rise. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the desired effect or the desired change statewide. We continue to see fatalities on our public roadways. Related to that are the rate of fatalities. This is based on VMT, so every 100 million vehicle miles traveled is the factor there. Similar trends here, being a continuous increase over the last decade or so. So this is an indication that statewide we are driving more, but we're also seeing an increase fatalities. Those are twofold. We are seeing a kind of a leveling out in total serious injuries statewide. They have been dropping slowly over time. ADOT is being conservative and has not seen a significant drop for their forecast. So the projection they have is just a slight decrease from there. The rate of serious injuries is also determined by vehicle miles traveled, and you see similar trend. Section 17. Final category are your vulnerable users. These are our pedestrians. Crystal, would you advance it one slide, please? I have a good battery. Thank you. So these are your pedestrian and bicyclists. All also your safety responders and construction workers is what ADOT classifies as vulnerable users on our network. We are statewide continuing to see an increase in these types of incidents, and projections also fall. I'll pause there for any questions. Data, okay. So part of the requirements for MPOs to participate in this FAST Act program, we have the opportunity to set our own projections, but we also have the recommendation and national best practice option of just adopting the statewide projections, and that has been the case the last 5 go-arounds. This does not supersede or override any of the RMAP targets that we've established. Those are the ones that we actually aim for. Those are the ones that we specifically use for our project analysis and our other reporting and measuring of achievement for our 2045 targets. Those performance measures are housed differently and treated differently than the ones brought forward today. This is strictly a different program, more of a statewide program. With that, I'll give it back to you, Chair. This is an action item. And, give it to discussion, open questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions, David?
A question. So, you know, I understand projection. It's based on what's actually happening on the system. We kind of have this discussion every year or 2 years. And I know we're going to have to move forward, it sounds like, with approving ADOT's projections. But I just want to point out, I mean, we've chosen not to take any actions of using this data to inform the projects we design, build, put in the RMAP, put in RTA Next, put in RTA. How are we ever going to curb this if we don't learn from this data? Or what are we hoping to get from this? And now that it looks like we haven't met any of our targets, so it's worse than bad because we already said it was getting worse. Now it's even worse than that. What are the actions we're planning to take as a region to curb this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can answer that. Fortunately, in 2014, when we developed the original RMAP, we aligned our safety goals and targets with the FAST Act program. So we actually have these 5 performance measures within our RMAP arsenal. We have 8 additional ones in addition to these 5. So those are the ones that we use to track our performance in the realm of safety. We also use the exact same data that's made available through the project development cycle. So we use the PAG tools, the Safety Explorer, the Project Explorer that we're working with for the TIP. All those are using the same data that ADOT uses for setting the projection. If we were to use the statewide projections, we would be skewing our aspirations to what the effect of the statewide occurrences are happening. We see that our safety data has details about crashes. Just in our own region, we see difference between jurisdictions on the reasons why crashes are happening. You can see the difference statewide between urbanized and rural areas. For example, in urbanized areas, a lot of the incidents are happening at intersections. In rural areas, you see roadway departures. So there's a lot of different reasons why we have crashes. And the state ADOT's target program, the projection program, is incorporating statewide incidents, aspirations, and trends and forecasting techniques. Whereas the RMAP ones, those are specifically focused on the incidents happening in the roadways within the PAG region. The goals are set within the desired change that we want to see on the performance metrics are within the PAG region. So my recommendation is to use the statewide projections as a compass as to where we are as a bigger purpose, because as the second largest MPO in the state, we do have effect on these totals, PAG being the leading region. But if we make a difference in the PAG region, we should see a difference in the state. And so we should be working more towards, in my opinion, towards the goals and objectives that we set up forth in RMAP. Put all of our attention into how do we use those into our project selection, perhaps even more than how we're doing in prioritization, how do we prioritize projects. We have the abilities to do that. But with the FAST Act measures, those projections, there's very little that we can do because they're statewide.
triggers this. This is a hard way to apply it to our region. But I am open to thought. It does come up every year. How can we use this?
Yeah, if I may as a follow-up, I understand that. Again, we have the data. We have not changed anything about how we evaluate projects. We get a score for performance measures. That's not incorporated into project selection in any meaningful way. There isn't funding set aside specifically to address this. It is brushed over as a roadway project to address safety concerns. And that's just not always the case if you're not actually putting in scope elements to address those safety issues. So, you know, I'll be fine moving forward with this because it's not quite anything that's going to change our perspective here on how we select projects. I just want to point out, nothing will ever change if we don't start investing in projects that curb this. We'll just, you know, it's as bad as it was 15 years ago.
Yes, I won't dispute that. What I will mention is that there is opportunity to do so. As we stand currently, as PAG have developed the tool sets to do so. We just don't have the directives to do so. The RMAP subcommittee that was formed is going to have that opportunity in the upcoming months. I'm developing a performance measure report so we can have a current snapshot of the state of the network. So we can see the most recent data, the trends that apply to our regions, how are we doing towards achieving that target, all that will be encompassed in there. And then even the fast tag measures will be incorporated as well, so that all that can be reviewed by you and your staff. So that's coming up at the latest early spring, but potentially as late as end of January. But it will probably come here before those two RMAP. So purposes, and that could be a start, but we need the direction to use performance measures more than what we are right now. It's informing the process, and that's where it lies. Well, with the chair,
You recognize.
Where does the direction come from?
Leadership, PAG leadership.
Okay.
Can I quote, shouldn't that be from regional council guides the direction?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Pretty much, yes.
Oh,
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you recall, and as many of the committee members may recall, PAG did issue some liability concerns in the form of a legal memorandum to TPC chair and other members. And within that, there were some heightened concerns within PAG leadership for any involvement in safety planning and preparations. And so as part of that, I think what happened was the jurisdictional representatives recognized that the opportunity may need to be something that takes place outside of the planning grounds of PAG and amongst the jurisdictional operators and practitioners. And so we've brought presentation to this committee before. We are launching a regional safety action plan. What we're hoping to get from that is the establishment of a process and the identification of safety specific projects that we will have then at the ready search for funding for. It still doesn't necessarily modify how we will prioritize tip selection or RMAP selection or any of those types of things, but it will certainly enhance the way that we at the jurisdictional stage tackle safety issues by identifying what those issues are and then identifying projects and initiatives that will address those issues. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense for us to continue to expect change, especially with something as formal as a legal memorandum saying that PAG as an MPO does not feel comfortable in the space of doing safety planning and involvement in identifying safety issues and safety corrective measures. So we're trying to bring that outside. We all know that it still needs to happen. And I think it's just become incumbent upon us to take the reins on that and do it on our own.
Thank you, Bob, for providing that information. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none. This is an action item. I get a motion? Or motion on there? Somebody move this. No. Sorry.
I move to adopt.
Great, thank you. We got a motion. You can get a second?
Second.
Got a second. Any other further questions? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, David. All right, moving on to item number 7, Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, also known as RMAP. Update.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and give you.
You want to?
Yeah.
All right.
So we also have Hannah with us today.
I was gonna
So
say, I don't know.
I'm sure she'll stand up and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll go ahead and give today's update. We did have our first RMAP working group meeting on November 30th. So I do want to say thank you to everybody who came and participated in that meeting. We put out a doodle poll for a follow-up working group meeting. So far, it looks like that's going to happen on January 16th in the afternoon, but we will follow up with a formal meeting invite to this group and then to your representatives that have been participating in that working group. Since then, we during that meeting, we had some discussion and feedback on the performance measures and the project list. That was sort of the 2 agenda items that were covered. We'll be continuing to have discussions on setting the performance targets and also anticipating a presentation from Dr. No and his team in January. So putting together some more information on some data that we've acquired and some work that they're doing with the activity-based model that will also help us work forward on the update. Our next steps will be to review some data and those data and trends, and then putting together a performance report. Let's see. We're also having discussions and putting together a update on how we can move forward with environmental justice J40 performance. So we're working through that internally and hope to bring that to the working group here soon. Project list, we have reached out to some of you directly and met with some of you directly to go over some cleanup work to the project list. Thank you guys for getting back in touch with us. We were having conversations with some of you as of yesterday, so I'm still cleaning out some duplications and adding some specifics into that project list, but we will have a next cut of it, if you will, for that working group meeting. Also, we'll be working with you guys through some rearrangements to the categorical elements and some project phasing work as well. That is really all I have to add today, unless Hannah has some correction to what I said or anything additional she wants to provide. Okay, no, so keep an eye out for a meeting invite and any additional follow-up. We've been meeting directly with your teams, so different staff members. So follow up with them as well, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. Question?
Brought up environmental justice. So I brought up in the future agenda items in September and every month since then that I would like to bring to this committee information about Justice 40 and how it's incorporated into our transportation planning process. So can you explain how that will actually play out, and if this committee will actually be learning about the process that they should be going through in order to select projects based on environmental justice and the Justice 40 requirements?
For sure, yeah. As I just mentioned, we're going to have that conversation next month. So we're working with Dr. No on some of the data acquisition work that we have and figuring out exactly how we're going to do that. And we'll be bringing a presentation probably to the working group first. And then of course that would come back to this body.
So that is part of the update. Just 40.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm, so your schedule for gathering public input will not feed into the paring down of the list. It will be something where we all kind of go through the list collaboratively and try to constrain it to budget and then take that out. Is that still the approach that you're envisioning?
That's what we envision. And I mean, we'll be able to see where we're at after the next meeting. And of course, once the RTA project list is solidified, we'll be able to kind of see where we're at and where we need to go from there. But
Any other questions? Remind me, when is this RMAT? When does it need to be approved by the council?
I believe it's September. But we are also working with FHWA because we're trying to coordinate the election of RTA next with approval of the RMAP. So so ideally, September of this year, but we'll see how it goes. Keep you guys posted.
Any other questions? Yeah, this is
Just one more, Mr. Chair. You had mentioned kind of, you're gonna take a look at the region-wide, pooled projects and whatnot. Is that something you're expecting to bring to the working group?
Yes.
Because I know there's lots of nuance there in terms of like shoving $3 billion of pavement needs into one single line item, so we all have flexibility to point to that as we move pavement projects forward.
Yes, that's correct. And I anticipate what we'll do is put together a recommendation for discussion with that group. So we're going to kind of put together our thoughts and present that and then get the feedback from the group and make adjustments as needed. We've heard from individual jurisdictions kind of what their needs are and how they foresee some of that coming together, the county specifically. So we're kind of putting those thoughts together and framing it so that it can be brought to that group.
And I guess, just a word of caution, it's always been a little bit troubling that the full unconstrained list is pointed to as reflecting the entirety of the region's needs. And so previously, it didn't really appear that jurisdictions had their specific, pavement and intersection needs lined out alone as, City of Tucson or Pima County or anybody. Those were always pooled into what could be fit into those region-wide line item projects. And those only appeared after they were pared down. So $3 billion, for example, is not really the pavement need through 2055. The pavement need is much more significant. So we took at least an abbreviated effort to try to identify our explicit, what are Pima County's pavement needs? And that's why we took an approach of saying Pima County pavement would be this, Pima County intersections would be this. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit better in terms of us understanding what our individual needs are before they get lumped into a regional bucket.
Thank you both. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, this is an informational item, so there's none. Thank you. Moving on to item number 8, future agenda items. Everybody?
So Pima County is working on a regional climate plan for all of Pima County to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our region. 43% of our emissions are coming from the transportation system. I've been sitting on this committee for over a year now, and at no point do I ever see any discussion about planning and incorporating how we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation system. About 2 weeks ago, the Federal Highway Administration came out with a requirement that MPOs have to do performance measures for greenhouse gas emissions reductions from the transportation system on the national highway system. So that will be incorporated. And I want to make sure that this committee is actually talking about this and thinking about this and addressing it and is educated about it, so that when you guys are planning your transportation projects, you're actually thinking about how we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as part of that. So I would like at the next meeting to address this issue, either with Dustin Fitzpatrick, who works here. He can attend this meeting. Maybe he could provide us with a presentation. I would be happy to provide information. I mean, we've got guidance documents that are from the Federal Highway Administration on how we can be incorporating this topic into our transportation planning process, not just environmental planning. It's actually needs to be incorporated into our transportation planning process. So I would like to see that happen sooner than later, because we are moving quickly on this. And if we don't incorporate this into our meetings and discuss it, then it's only going to actually become a bigger piece of our greenhouse gas emissions pie. And we really need to be addressing this now. So I would like to see that on the next agenda, please.
Next possible meeting if you guys are ready. I think we guys also have the modeling too. I'm sorry.
We've been discussing about the new guideline and the standard development and those. But I think it's just the problem is actually the modeling team is involved in that kind of discussion. But maybe I may just suggest at the next meeting, but just the following meeting, just the March meeting, and then have a clear idea, or just prepare some kind of all year for the options.
Aren't those performance measures due in February?
It's actually, yeah, but the timeline we have like actually for TIP is as well, and just preparing those following update, and the more likely just heavy load of this January. We've been about that more options, but we are not just about here, but sometime in all the February we're expecting to have. So maybe or if you need to just know
Yeah, I would suggest, if I may, this could be a discussion at multiple meetings. It's new content for a lot of us. I know I'm gonna have questions, and I think you just should plan on this being on many meetings as we all learn about this. I think decision making, if there's decision making with options that we're looking at, that is something this group should be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is you're going to come back and tell us, but what I want to see is this committee involved in actually the decision-making process for what we're doing. So I don't think it's up to PAG to make sure that it's done, but it's really up to this committee to make sure that we're doing it for the region and that actually the regional considerations are taken into account.
Yes.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, we have to be kind of careful about this particular agenda item because it's not actually, these topics are not actually on the agenda for the public to see. So future agenda items can be suggested, but we cannot really discuss them and comply with open meeting law.
How do we ensure they actually end up on the agenda though? Because a lot of times, like with Justice 40, I've recommended that back in September, and we're sitting here today. And meanwhile, nobody's planning for Justice 40 in the projects that we're looking at for TIP or RMAP. So we continue to not plan for things that we need to plan for because they can't be discussed at these meetings.
We'll see if we put them on the next one. Or you let us know if when you guys are ready.
Sure.
You have to work with staff and see if you guys prepare for it.
Yep.
Give us an update. Here, at least where we're at. And then we'll take it from there.
So does that mean they're gonna be on the next meeting?
If not, they're gonna give us an update as to where they're at. It sounds to me they need to.
I agree. I agree. If we don't have, we can't discuss them, that makes sense, but we can certainly discuss the agenda, which is what they want to do. That's perfectly legit. It has nothing to do with the open meeting laws, discussing what we want to see on our next agenda.
And I think, we heard you loud and clear. I think that's shoot for.
I think we don't want to shoot for it. We're asking for an item to be on the next agenda, and we're expecting that item to be on the next agenda because there are time constraints with the reporting, and it's important that we're a part of that conversation. So the expectation is January. And I will say, if it's more effective for us to put something in writing from the county that says this needs to be on an agenda and give the defense, we can do that. But this feels like the appropriate time to say the next meeting, we need this item.
And by the way, this has been brought up multiple times at regional council also.
Duly noted. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Randy.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I was just offering that, is this agenda item one that can become actionable such that a motion can be made to and voted on the.
I don't
today
think it can be
to
actionable,
request
because it's
and
gonna be for future.
for meeting agenda item.
Mr. Chair, this is an opportunity for the committee to suggest future agenda items. That's what this agenda item is.
Can we suggest that by a motion?
It's not an actual item.
Why?
Well, it's not on the agenda, so. Yeah, that's something that we need interpretation as to what can be an action item if it's not in the agenda. But
Mr. Chair, I have some information that might create some confusion in the room. And please.
yes, please.
The state deadline for setting these targets is in February. The MPO deadline is 180.
Can you step over to the mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the deadline for this program that was mentioned is in February. That is the statewide deadline. MPOs have 180 days after the state sets their target to satisfy rate requirements. So we would be looking at end of July, August before we would have to have something like this.
Thank you.
All the more reason to have it soon so we can talk about it and discuss it together.
That's exactly what we're planning for.
Great. Let me know if you need any help with any education on it.
Thank you. Any other items for the future? Right here, none. On to item number 9, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second.
Oh,
Second.
We got a motion. We're gonna just need a second.
Second.
I guess.
We got a second. We got a motion.
We got a second.
If there's no other questions, I'll signify by saying aye.
I.
Aye.
You know, motion carries. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we could take just a brief 5 to 7 minute break between this item and thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. It is now 10 a.m. and we'd like to begin and open the Transportation Improvement Program or TIP Subcommittee meeting. The first item on the agenda is a call to order and introductions. You all for me, I'm Carolyn Laurie, and to my
Heidi Latcham, Conor Morana.
Rod Lane with South Central District.
Andy Beeman, City of Tucson Transportation.
Catherine Skinner, Pima County Transportation.
Eddie Brown, Pack.
James Chow, Tag RTA.
Najee Ryan Pag.
Thank you. And online, let's see, we have Mark Novak. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Let's see, next we have Thomas Garcia from the town of Cerritos. Thomas?
Yes, good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we also have some PAG staff members with us online. David Zinda, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Morning, David. Thank you for joining us. And we also have Adam Ledford with us. Adam?
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. With that, we move on to agenda item 2, in-kind reporting. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording times donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to allow towards the use of matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent on this meeting. Time spent working with PAG and RTA initiative programs and special projects also may be eligible for consideration for matching funds. With that, we move to item 3. This is an informational item and an overview of HERF 26 programming recommendations. ADOT staff will be providing an update on projected revenue availability for HERF 26 and discuss programming recommendations. With that, I'd like to quickly review HERF 26 in the region. And recently, the Arizona State Transportation Board policies were amended. This was completed on November 17th, 2003. However, the programming policy associated with HERF 12.6 and 2.6 stayed the same. And just as a reminder, I'll read that policy. It is the policy of the board to make available additional 2.6 funds of a highway fund for use in cooperation with MAG and PAG on state routes and highways that are in the region. Right, with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Hoffman.
As with 2.6 is just to reiterate, it is not federal aid. It is local funding. So and ADOT finance does the cash flow balance. They do a quarterly cash flow report that they send to pay after the balances. And any unprogrammed 2.6, just like 12.6, stays the cash flow and carry forward from one year to the next. And they've developed a spreadsheet. I don't know if you include that in the packet or
no.
Okay, so they've developed the cash flow process for expected revenues, expenses, and then they also include a kind of a contingency factor of a certain amount to make sure that we don't hit the program or get to a negative balance for 6 accounts. So they project that out, and when the projects go into the TIP, they get approved. They go through the cash flow analysis, and then they, based on the project, they will spread that that amount that is in the TIP out 3 or 4 years, depending on the size of the project or their expected expenditure. So as of right now, and it's been shared before, in fiscal year 26, there's approximately $7 million available for program you can get. That could be done through the development process or be amended later for program that's on. having those details again, it needs to be programmed on the state highway system, but there can be local projects that would take out right away. And that would be eligible. On those projects, if specific amount of cost within the 8 out right of way is not known, that could be done at a later time program. So if there's any questions on that.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Carolyn, Madam Chair, I'm not sure what you prefer, but if I may add to this, thank you, Mark, for your introduction. It might be helpful to also speak to the TIP policies and procedures with regard to HERF 2.6. So if I may just speak to that. So there's a policy 10.0. PEG HERF 2.6 funds are available to the region to cooperatively program with ADOT for projects or studied on the state system. And then it talks about the fact that PEG HERF 2.6 funding should not be programmed more than 2 years in advance. And then there's another one, 10.3, priority for 2.6 funding shall be given to projects that, 1, fund RTA projects that are on a state facility, 2, supplement funding for a jurisdictional project that is located on an ADOT route or highway, 3, cover a local share contribution to an ADOT project. And there are several more, but I wanted to add that. So we want to thank ADOT for bringing this forward because it is a cooperative process. There are constraints, has to be on the state system. But the priorities that are identified in the TIP policies and procedures, the first one is to fund RTA projects that are on the state facility or state right of way. Given that for the next agenda item, we do have a proposal for the programming of the roughly, I wrote down 7.677 of HERF 2.6 available in FY26.
Again, this is an informational item. Are there any questions from the committee? Any? Yes.
That $7.6 million, is that available this coming year? 2025?
No, it's for 26.
For 26.
But
One question, Jamie, I'm sorry, I missed the very last thing you said. Did you say you have a proposal for that programming is included?
Yes, yeah, great question. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Bemis. So in coordination with ADOT about this agenda item and the fact that making it available for a regional discussion about projects that have our RTA projects and have components within the state right of way, we did kind of consider what's on our RTA roadway on the project sheet that we're presenting that could potentially expend some 2.6 that have a nexus with ADOT right of way. So we, for example, and we'll talk about this, well, Barraza Aviation, there's a funding gap there, so that we need to talk about. But 2 city projects are a consideration. But for now, we're just actually looking at the Grant UPRR project as a candidate. We've heard that 22nd Street might also have some ADOT right of way, but I think some of this, maybe I can just say this now. So, you know, it's late December or mid to late December, and the worksheet that we're going to be providing is really a snapshot in time. It's our best available guess as to how we can program the funds. The HERF 2.6 and 12.6 are evergreen. So, and we're talking about FY26. So we've got a proposal to program these dollars, but we understand that there's some questions about, well, how much of Grant UPR is actually in the right of way and could use that. Same with 22nd Street. So we recognize that it's almost like a placeholder that will need to be amended later. But we want to move forward with the TIP development process to actually program the dollars, but recognize that we're going to probably need to make some adjustments later.
Understood, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have questions online? No? Okay, thank you. With that, we move to agenda item 4, programming of fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2029, available regional HERF 12.6 and STBG funds on RTA corridor projects. This is an possible action item. We're, let's see, the recommendations on programming of FY 25 to 29 available regional funds, and we'll be focusing on RTA corridor projects. With that, I'd like to introduce Mr. James Chow and ask you to provide the next steps for us. Thank you.
Madam Chair. So this is our very familiar worksheet. I made a few changes since our last meeting. Legend shows a couple of additional colors and some further explanation as to what adjustments were made to this worksheet. Jamie, I'll let you handle.
Yeah, thank you, James, and I think we'll work in tandem here. So early yesterday morning, sent out a revised cover sheet and worksheet for the TIP subcommittee. So
One item on that. I noticed it was in my email, but sometimes I look at things online. I don't believe it's posted publicly, any of the documents you guys sent. So you guys might want to take note of that so it's more readily available.
So, yeah, we made some adjustments since we shared the cover sheet and worksheet with the TPC. So we wanted to talk about those adjustments, and maybe I'll just cover what's in the worksheet, the cover sheet, those 5 bullet points briefly, and then transition over to James to kind of walk through those. I mean, I guess you can walk through them as I say them. So the first bullet point in the cover sheet from yesterday, an additional $5 million of RTA funding was added to the Tangerine Road I-10 locking out project FY 2024. This funding comes from the FY 24 RTA budget contingency. Remember, we've talked about that budget contingency next to $4.5 million roughly. Yeah. Yes. So this is $5 million of that. 24.5 million is being in this worksheet on Tangerine Road project. That was something that was discussed at the last TIP subcommittee shortfall on that project. Next, yes,
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Excuse me. Did you say that there's a version of this sent out this morning?
Yesterday morning.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, did you get that one?
All right, yeah.
C4. So yeah, that James has been yeah, the one that's in the TPC packet, I believe, is C3.
I have C4.
Okay, good. C4.
Sorry. Carry on.
No, thank you. Great question. Yeah, I want to make sure you have the information, the correct information in front of you. The next bullet point from the cover sheet for the Valencia Road Cold to Houghton project, adjustments were made so that the $19,422,000 of RTA funding was added to the project, consistent with the recent IGA financial exhibit. This funding comes from the FY24 RTA budget contingency that I just mentioned. Also for HERF 12-6 funds, $63,000 was removed in FY24 and $631,000 was removed in FY2025. Match the TIP and the IGA exhibit, $70,000 was added in FY24 to the various local funds. More that needs to be said about that one, James?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Thank you. The next bullet point for the 22nd Street I-10 to Tucson Boulevard project, HERF 12-6 was increased in FY24 by $5,115,000 and decreased by the same amount in FY 2026. The HERF 12-6 amount in FY 24 now matches the amount currently programmed in FY 22 through 2026 TIP. So through this process over the last several months, we were making adjustments, trying to hit fiscal constraint, and we had proposed in FY 24 to reduce the HERF. We heard that as a concern at the last TIP subcommittee, so we restored that amount to the amount that's currently programmed in the TIP. Next bullet point, HERF 26 funds. So this is where we get into the HERF 26 proposal. HERF 26 funds of $4,233,000 were programmed on the Baraza Aviation Parkway Extension Project to address a funding gap and release HERF 12-6 funds, which are more flexible. So we were moving very quickly in the past several weeks to make the adjustments. As you recall, we deprogrammed STBG on 22nd Street in FY 24. We programmed that 15.337 million on ADOT's I-10 Keno Country Club TI's project as part of an exchange to be repaid to the Baraza Aviation Parkway. There was a miscoding of the amount in the worksheet, and we saw that the actual TIP amendment had and ADOT's project list had 3 million of STP in FY 26 on Baraza. We hadn't put any STP in that row. We had bundled it in the bottom row, thinking it was all ASTP. Only 15.337 would be ASTP. So to correct that, PAG is proposing to program 3 million, address that $3 million gap. Plus, we had I think it was we had 1.233 million of HERF 12R 12.6 in FY 26. Instead replaced that 12.6 with 2.6. So again, the total for Barraza would be of 2.6 would be 4.233. And that would meet the commitment in the admin code or ballot for the RTA's commitment to the Barraza Aviation Parkway project of 19.6. And then the last bullet point. Okay, I'm sorry, I should read a couple more things here. Let's see. All right. I only read one part of that bullet point. Also, HERF 2.6 funds, 3 million, were programmed on a Grant Road underpass reconstruction project for portions of the project within the ADOT right of way. An equal amount of HERF 12.6 was released. Reserving a balance of unprogrammed HERF 12.6 funds supports TIP policies and procedures for maintaining construction contingency. So this is where we're proposing something that may ultimately need to be adjusted. But again, the TIP is TIP project list is a snapshot in time, and we have mechanisms to amend the TIP. We're talking about FY 2026, so we have time to make adjustments. So those were the proposals for HERF 2.6. I believe we would have about 400,000 that's not programmed yet as part of that proposal of HERF 2.6. And then finally, the amount of unencumbered HERF 12.6 funds was adjusted to incorporate an additional 88,000 that was rolled forward and is committed for 2 non-RTA roadway element projects. So we've been spending a lot of time making sure we have the correct number of the correct amount for the unencumbered HERF 12.6 that can be programmed in through 25 through 2029. So we made that adjustment as well, and we've reflected that calculation in the cover sheet. So you can see that on the last page. The calculation is basically at the top we've got 69,504,000 of the rounded ending cash balance for HERF 6 for FY 2023. Then the rollover amount that's committed funding, including non-RTA projects, amounts to 52,594,000. And so if you subtract that from the total cash balance, the unprogrammed HERF as of July 1 is 16,910, which you see on this worksheet. So that was the final adjustment today. So with that, I'll turn it over to James if you wanted to walk through any of those.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. Madam Chair, I believe that, that was a very thorough explanation. I would be happy to answer any questions. I think both of us would be, at this point, happy to answer questions or clarify anything in the worksheet.
I have a question. So we've been talking about the HERF 2.6 a little bit and then where it is, but you don't have lines anywhere that we could just see HERF 2.6 on its own. It's bundled with other funding. Am I reading this correctly? Because I'm having a lot of trouble figuring out how to figure out the math that Mark talked about and the numbers here.
Yes, well, initially the worksheet wasn't built for the HERF 2.6, so you're correct that there is not a line for the 2.6, but it's a limited amount, so we'll just try to walk through it that way.
Yeah, so the TIP document itself that this committee is trying to build needs to identify that line independently. So I'll say if at some point there's going to be an action, probably not this meeting, but an upcoming meeting, we're going to need to see those specified.
If I may, Madam Chair, go ahead.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, thank you. We recognize that as well with this HERF 2.6 discussion. It kind of came up recently, and this worksheet is one we kind of started with almost a year ago. And so as James said, we didn't actually have individual rows for 2.6. Right now for today, to see the math, you can go to the cell. We can go to the cells and you can highlight one and you can see the math that I explained. And we tried to explain it here in the cover sheet. So you're right. It would be what we need to show is actually a row that shows fiscal constraint. For today, we don't have that, but it's something that we can find a way to provide that going forward. So we can also add notes. So you can see well, I talked about that being that various state fed being 3 million of perf 2.6. And then for Baraza, if you don't mind scrolling down to Baraza in the 19.6 row, you can see the math there. It's a combination of two sums of ASTBG, 3 million of HERF 2.6 that was STBG, and now a 1.263 of HERF 2.6. So yeah, we recognize that you don't have great visibility here, so.
But as we did, this is a worksheet, right, to inform a TIP project list, right? And when we show the TIP project list, all the specific fund sources will be broken out and the fiscal years. So that should be on hand and pending, right?
That was in the CPC meeting, I walked through the anticipated schedule for the TIP development process, and we're shooting for February to have a full draft TIP list if we can get everything programmed. It's going to be a big lift, so we'll see if we can make that happen or convene a special meeting. But that's exactly right. We would show the funding breakout in that full draft TIP project list. Is that right, Caroline?
Yes, Ms. Skinner, our hope today is that we can come to an agreement on these numbers so that we can then move forward on the actual programming to be able to provide you the TIP proposed listing. So then we can move into that next phase of the TIP development process. So I think that's maybe what you were asking for, the TIP listing. Kind of. I mean, this is just very different than previous cycles. And I think we're overly complicating things where they didn't need to be, but we can proceed. I mean, I guess I would suggest when it comes time to translating this to actual tip sheets, we're going to need something that has these equations revealed if we're going to have any way of like seeing that it matches what we're talking about here. Yeah. Understood. And I know we've only received PDFs to date, so.
If I may too, I think you still have a notes column. But I think some of that is captured there. So to the extent that we're, you're wondering, well, what are those values? What's 3 million? We can update the notes as well to capture the amounts of HERF 2.6 in this.
I have a related question from an earlier item. I didn't see the tip schedule, that slide that you had shared earlier in the packet or the materials, but I was really have that, or can we have that?
Is that something that you would be willing to share?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can share that. Do you need it right now?
No, sorry. Just...
Yeah. I would, before the meeting summary, like before next month, it would be good to reference as we plan out the next few months.
And as we will get into on this item, there's some movement that would may say need to happen right on the 5, 6, 7. So I just want to my mind, in front of my mind, those kind of deadlines of things are going to be.
Yes. Perhaps it would be helpful if we just walk through that again now. Crystal will be able to pull it up for us, and then we can talk through it and discuss what our next steps would be. Again, today we're hopeful that this can be a possible action item, so we can begin to do the formal programming of this document to share with you.
We're going to look at the TPC slides with the schedule. Is that what you're?
Are you able to access the TPC slide? And perhaps, Mr. Brown, you can go through the time periods again for us.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, looking at the wrong screen. Thank you. So on your screen, you might be showing up in the middle of your screen. On the screens on the wall, you can see the anticipated schedule that was presented at the TPC meeting. So September, October timeframe, we had the TIP subcommittee review the updated RTA roadway cost estimates. September through December, TIP subcommittee review and discussion of RTA roadway element programming, SDBG and HERF 12.6. And we need to add 2.6 to that as well. Again, this kind of came up in recent conversations with KDOT about how they'd like to talk about and discuss 2.6. November through December, Transit Working Group review of transit project list. December and January, preliminary committee review of draft TIP project lists. So we had the TPC earlier this morning reviewing or looking at 2 draft project lists. I would also add for January, as Dr. Encino was saying, that that's a very heavy workload time for the modeling that is required for the TIP development process. So there's a lot of technical pieces that depend on these project lists. So they've got to code the network for the base year and the forecast year. The GIS team has to digitize any new projects for the maps. We do Title VI analysis, we do a performance assessment, we do air quality conformity. So a lot happens in January behind the scenes, which is why we're trying to keep this process moving forward with the project list. February, TPC, we'd like to bring forward the full draft TIP project list. The next slide, I don't know if we need to go there, but I had shared at the TPC meeting, there are several, probably 8 or so different independent project lists that are combined with the full draft TIP project list. We'd like to bring the full draft TIP project list to management and regional council in March, convene the TIP open houses in mid to late March. TPC review and recommendation for the approval of the full draft TIP document in April, followed by commencing the 30-day public comment period. And management committee review of the final draft TIP in May, and then the public hearing and regional council review and request for approval at the end of May. We're happy to share these things.
Thank you for going through that again with us, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And please do share. That'll keep us all on track. I guess I'm curious about the connection between regional council and RTA board, knowing that there's north of $150 million of RTA funds that still need to find a home within the 5-year program. Is that something that leadership or staff are anticipating to start that discussion in March with the RTA board? Or will that just be an exclusive regional council discussion? We're dealing with the HERF and STBG and here be it. Do we know yet, or?
So it's our intention to keep moving on creating the project listing. So we will use we use the term priority draft. So we are looking to focus on programming our 2.6, 12.6, STBG, and any local funding that you can share with us for this document. So we can utilize those funds as readily as they are available. RTA funds have more flexibility, and those conversations are open at any point to have with our executive if additional funding is needed to augment on top of what we have currently available. So our goal really is to try to get these lists through December and February so that we can keep this process moving. And as we proceed, if there's funding identified, as we did during our last meeting, we were able to complete an IGA amendment and augment the funding for the Marana project. And that's our intent. So as we run through this process, our goal is really to keep moving that project list. And I'm happy to provide a different view of the documents and the tip tables. Mr. Brown, is there anything else you'd like to?
No, I think thank you, Madam Chair. That covers it really well. I guess I was unclear about the 150 million that we were talking about.
I'm just kind of throwing the rough numbers out of the gap of 140 million. Shortfall within the worksheet that we've been seeing. And then knowing that, there's a certain collection per year that's happening. There's contingency put aside in each fiscal year. I think we're probably in the ballpark of, a significant amount of funding of RTA that will not be programmed. And I'm trying to think forward to the way that Director Skinner will brief our regional council and RTA board member in terms of what to expect to see within a tip listing and where the other part of the equation will be at that point in time. So I'm just trying to think ahead a little bit.
Yeah, and if I can, that 1 week with all those meetings, CACT and CRTA board, I can't remember which one it was at, but at one, the executive director did say somebody on one of the committees had asked, you know, it looks like there's $140+ million shortfall. And he assured us that there was RTA money adequate to cover that. And so I think that's kind of saying what Paul is saying. Will that appear in the TIP document as
we'll get those
plugging in the
questions.
holes or not? It won't appear as plugging the holes, even though we know the holes exist.
And it also, it says so in the materials that you mentioned, the RTA budget ensures the project's ready for construction of supplemental funding. But the RTA budget is going to.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, exactly. And then we try to also address that question. Another bullet was update fiscal years 26 to 29. Due to the expiration and or potential renewal of RTA revenues, fiscal years 26 to 29 of the TIP will need to be updated at a later time. So, and we've talked about the RTA budget process and the annual budget process. So the 24.5 unprogrammed RTA contingency that was made available through the 24 budget process, as we talked about, was actually it's being programmed through this process. So now FY25, what are the needs? What are the gaps? But we can't really, we can talk about that in general terms, but it's not really available yet until that budget process has convened.
I understand that's the perspective that's being taken now. That is not how this TIP was developed the first 15 years of it. And it's contrary to standing TIP policy that projects that are going into construction in year 1 and 2 need complete construction funding. So I know we had a big discussion on this last time. It sounds like we're going to take it case by case. Jurisdiction submits letter that says, I need to go to construction. I have a $10 million shortfall, and a TIP amendment and IGA will be fast tracked. Is that?
That's correct.
I think it'll foresee that being continually challenging and a little frustrating for this process, because what that does is leave the ultimate bottom line vague. So we don't have a sense, because we're not looking at all the available funding and project costs, understanding that the RTA board hasn't set and adopted a budget yet for the but we do still have available to us the knowledge of what is collected, where it's programmed and when, and projections for what's to be collected on marrying that information so that the bottom, the spreadsheet's fantastic, but that kind of big bottom line number is missing is higher as project needs arise, which I'm glad we're able to do. We have a lot of need, right? We do have a mechanism process for that, but we'll continue to be.
If I may, Madam Chair, we anticipate bringing updates to Management Committee, Regional Council in the coming months. So these conversations are going to be happening at higher level committees. And as there are concerns raised about this situation, I think the higher committees will also have an opportunity to weigh in. But I feel like we've been, as clear as possible about the situation with RTA funding and the constraints we're dealing with. So I feel like it's the best that we can do at this time for this TIP subcommittee.
Yeah, and to be, as you may remember, recently we had the town of Marana amendment that came through. We also received a request from your agency for grant 3-4, and I believe that Rick has been working very closely to move that forward in an expedited fashion. So we have examples of how this process is working internally, and it's working through our process.
And I've just appreciated those in the statement. Right? I'm just seeing the kind of projections of the bottom line that's not moving.
So if I may, Madam Chair, in the past, we had a ballot to work with, and we were working with it. I'm sure, of course, you know this. This is leading up to something else. So as we move forward, we do this on an annual basis. I think we find more realistic project costs if we wait until the time when they're actually ready to go to construction, versus just plugging in some kind of arbitrary number now based on a projection that, fortunately, revenues projection that has been low, and we've been pleasantly surprised, but that may change. And it seems to me that the process that we've seen in this fiscal year has worked well. We had a $24.5 million contingency of TPT. We were able to program that fairly quickly on Tangerine and Valencia East. And and then we were also able to assist with Grant Road 3 and 4. So it's kind of the immediate need, the construction activity prior to the end of fiscal 26. So we're looking, at all these things that maybe we wouldn't have discussed 5 or 10 years ago. So the landscape's changed some, and just keep that in mind. So I'm not sure it's helpful to look at the way we did things in the past.
I understand that. It is, and I'm glad it's working well. I hope it's working well. We don't have any projects that are active, so I don't need to belabor this more, but if you don't have a project and you're not seeing it, there's a lack of transparency and an inability for me to say with confidence, yeah, it looks like we're on track for delivering the rest of the RTA programs, because I have a spreadsheet that says we have $150 million shortfall. That's what I have to report out. And that's what I'm trying to express. It doesn't look like we're in good shape to deliver this program. And it looks like every time we need to add money, we're going to add 2 to 3 months to deal with the scheduling of multiple boards and committees to hear about the changes that need to happen, rather than programming anticipated revenues on projects so that we can move forward with projects as would be typical. And then you're just dealing with the changes and the contingencies for changes. You're not dealing with the whole construction funding being blank. That's what I'm saying.
I would add even shorter program, even if you don't program the money, showing the available programmable.
I mean, Madam Chair, I'd be curious to hear of other committee members' thoughts on this. We are really hoping to get action today. We've had several TIP subcommittee meetings. We recognize this is a snapshot in time. We'd like to keep the TIP development cycle on track. I'd just like to see if any other members have thoughts about this. We hear you. We understand this is a departure from years past. Definitely. But want to hear if other members want to talk about any concerns, comments on this.
Just a question. For these projects that are shown in the first couple of years, are they fully funded? Like, for example, you got Tangerine, Summerbell, Orange Grove, or are these just phases that are fully funded?
If we may go back to Mr. Cal's sheet, would be helpful. Thank you, Crystal.
It really depends on the project. With Tangerine, there is a future phase. And I'm not sure this fully funds it.
But for that phase that's shown on the first couple of
For
years,
2A, that's fully funded.
Okay.
The 2B is not fully funded. And this would not, Silverbell, of course, the north portion has been deferred to RTNX. So this is the Torre de Camino del Cerro, is that correct, Rick?
Yes.
A segment.
That segment is fully funded.
I believe it's close. I believe we're waiting for an updated.
Yeah, we'll have updates on that. We know the cost estimates is dated. They're finalizing a lot of the work activities that we see. So we expect to get that and then know what our cost differential will be out there.
That's based on the cost estimate, not.
Correct. Yeah, we're trying to plug in the latest and greatest cost out as part of our annual check-in with everybody on where you at, what you got going. And some of these things reflect, okay, that's, you heard Jamie mention it, snapshot in time on a moving target. So we're trying to grab it, see it right then and there, and then see what we can do going forward.
Let's see. So Grant UP, that would be the entirety of the project. Downtown Links.
That's the one that just recently opened? No, that's not it. That's the first.
I was going to go back to the First Avenue is not fully funded, and Grant 3 and 4, or I'm sorry, Grant 5 and 6 are not fully funded, and those are reflected here. The others are fully funded based upon the current cost estimate that we have. So that's why I skipped first. But so it's some are the corridor, others are just segments.
We recognize updates are, we're in that period right now. We opened up one bid and with the latest and greatest numbers, but it's still, we're in that cycle again. So that's where we're at as a region, having to watch and see, okay, how well are we doing this?
So Houghton, for instance, this covers the 22nd to Irvington section, does not cover the, I believe it's Tank Verde Speedway. Is that correct?
That's been deferred.
And that's been deferred. So maybe it might be more useful if a person has a question on a specific project, but yeah, it's mixed.
I think, James, if I'm saying this right, to your question, Jose, we tried to fund everything to the maximum amount possible and utilizing the regional funds, with the two big ones being First Ave and 5-6 being the big gaps that will need the RTA supplementation. So we tried to work with the rest of them to get those, making sure they're very well.
I'll just ask you, because normally in the first 2 years of a tip, when the project does move in the first 2 years, we're expecting it's fully funded. Saying all these segments are, phases are fully funded.
So I think one of the items that we've learned through time is traditionally we would program an entire project as the ballot called out for it. And as things are broken up into segments, we find ourselves in a situation like the Marana project, where there's one tip number associated with 3 or 4 different actual projects. We have that same issue with Grant Road. We've had some also with East Avenue and the transition between the city project and the county project. So we're seeing that perhaps maybe you see the segment is not fully funded. However, that portion of the project is being fully funded in this worksheet. The out portion may not be, but it's something that we'll be looking at again closely. Grant Road is a perfect example of this this process that we just are discussing, where the city of Tucson drafted us a memo requesting additional funding for 3 and 4. So we're moving through the process of fully funding that to meet the construction amount, as Mr. Ellis has worked closely with the city on. And then in the future, we'll come back and we'll look at 5 and 6 and what the cost will be once we get that request. So that's the piece with the amendment item that we're working on for FY22 and 26, keeping track of the requests that are made to us so we can do a full amendment. ADOT also recently went through this process with their program. We worked closely with them to do the formal amendment a couple months ago. And then during that time, Mr. Lane worked closely with us and Mark, of course, to reallocate that STBG funding, so we can make sure we kept it in the region. So we do feel like this is working. We have, now that I'm counting, I think there's 4 or 5 different examples where we've run this kind of memo process to use RTA funds if necessary to augment. We'd love to be able to use all the HERF 12.6 and local funding first. I hope that answers any questions. Mr. Brown, would you like to?
Let me expand on that, Madam Chair. So, and also something I don't know that we covered about this worksheet is the green highlighting underneath the projects that are required to begin a phase of construction prior to FY 2026. That's been our priority. So in terms of the funding for those projects, I believe that we're addressing that. And so we're trying to meet those statutory requirements as well as part of this process. And keep in mind too, that these cost estimates, we've seen some really big increases, and we're trying to adjust and still work within these constraints. So we're understanding that there are some differences in the way things have happened in the past, but we do have a process, as you were saying, to address these issues on a case-by-case basis. Seems to have worked.
Yes, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to add that it's good to have the green highlighting and keep our eye on those that are going to have that constraint of being. I'll just, on the language and the packet materials as well, just what that means in practice. I want to be clear, there are going to be projects that aren't highlighted in green here, have costs arise that need to aren't currently perhaps in the program. to keep those schedules on track to be delivered. And should we come into a program situation, those projects get delayed because they're not. That'll increase the cost of the delivery of the whole program, while simultaneously not necessarily advancing any of those green projects in faster. They don't have. So I just want to keep that on our radar, because I think they're pending, and we have some coming from the city of Tucson. Actually, we've been working on it for a bit now. Projects here that are critical items that are slowing down.
Thank you for bringing that forward. At any time, the city has the opportunity to write the memo to our executive director to back up to request additional funding. That's always available. We are watching these closely. We do want to make sure that we're delivering the RTA projects as intended for the voters, making sure we're meeting all those timelines with construction or other phasing requirements as called out in the ballot. So we do acknowledge that. Thank you. And anything else on this item?
If I may, Madam Chair, we thank you for your comment, Mr. Rodriguez. Any other jurisdictions that haven't commented in terms of this worksheet? Again, we're really hoping to get some action today.
As far as the worksheet goes, I can say it looks, I mean, I understand what you're saying, breaking it down, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It's easy to read for me. And the process that you were explaining, Carolyn, as far as additional money, that was actually a pretty easy process. I thought it was pretty painless and pretty quick. So as far as Miranda's perspective, I think the process works.
Thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah, I know we've got the bulk of projects on here and a lot of the moving parts right now, and I think, you know, appreciate you all having really rolled up your sleeves and gone through the patience to try and get it balanced here to be possible. I don't think, you know, we've had a long conversation about 22nd Street specifically yesterday. I think it's clear we're not quite there on the numbers right now for 22nd Street in a couple ways. We have this outstanding sort of issue, you know, reimbursement issue that we need to work through, which I just want to make sure we can hopefully still do through a 26 tip amendment. We're working that out, but also for the sake of the 25 to 29 tip, which I actually missed this one for per the schedule that I understand. Our most optimistic construction schedule for 22nd Street would end in 27. Our more pessimistic would maybe trickle into being in construction in 28. So the current funds are shown here in 29, and potentially those shown in 28 on our optimistic schedule. We wouldn't not be able to utilize those funds at that time unless we have some mechanism that we've worked out and have mutually on to be able to access those funds in 28 and 29 funds in 26. So that's a challenge for us. So we can take action on moving this list forward with that sort of caveat and contingency, or sorry, just caveat that as we continue to, we're working closely on this. You know, there's a lot of moving parts. We expect to have updated costs at some point that we flexibility to address that.
Yeah, thank you for that. We do hope that we can stick to our schedule so that we can help meet those deadlines for you. And this month and next month, we're really kind of getting crunched on time for being able to provide and meet our deadlines for the 25 to 29 tip. If we continue to just keep discussing this worksheet, our intent and hope is that we can move it forward. We can hit the outlines that were shared earlier in TPC, and again, Jamie shared with us during the subcommittee meeting.
We absolutely want to move it forward, and we frankly need to. And I know that schedule is what is earning saying the way it's programmed right now isn't functional for the project.
Chair, if I may, yeah, thank you for sharing that. We've heard that at the individual meeting as well. So we recognize that's something that we're going to need to be in contact with the city on the schedule. And again, this is a snapshot in time, so we can amend the FY25 to 2019 once it's approved. And I guess, I don't know if Mark, if you wanted to add anything based on the conversation with FHWA and kind of showing the funding in the program. I think they really need to show full funding to move forward with the grant agreement. So we understand that you know, things change and we can amend later, but this will help us achieve this.
Yeah, I think, we're gonna have to continue to have those conversations. If it's amenable to FHWA to be shown as is with, pending, agreements for, utilizing. And that works, then that works.
Yeah.
And not ready to go through an amendment process. So.
Okay. Thank you. We are looking for a motion on this today.
Is it state financial constraint?
Yes.
I would suggest that as a potential motion, that we take this spreadsheet with the funding shown and then take it to the next level of looking at by project basis with the phases distinguished and the funding sources as would appear in the tip. So we can evaluate that for fiscal constraint and the other requirements.
Is that a motion?
Yes. I move that, yeah.
In fact, just to clarify the motion, the motion is to approve this with the understanding that the programming that will show in the full draft project list will show the amounts and phases and fund sources, so you can review fiscal constraint. Is that correct?
I'm recommending this be the starting point for creating the tip sheets. I'm not saying that these numbers work yet because I don't know how it splits out by phase, which would answer Jose's question about whether construction is in the first 2 years and fully funded, nor do I know the various funding sources that make up the miscellaneous lines on here, so these numbers are good as far as we can take it on this sheet, but we need to take it the next step.
That work for you?
Yes, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Should be any other further discussion? Okay, we'll go through by jurisdiction. Ms. Skinner, since you were the first.
I'll say aye.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Ms. Lasham. Aye. Mr. Lane.
Aye.
Mr. Hoffman. Mr. BMS.
Aye.
Thank you. And then online, let's see, we have Mr. Garcia. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, aye.
And with that, the motion passes unanimously. Oh, so wait. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Mr. Josue. Aye, thank you. Excuse me. And with that, the motion passes. Thank you all. We move to item 5 and adjournment. Thank you.